Hey folks, it's Mayor Victoria Gearity coming to you live this Saturday. I think I'm just going to be doing one live Facebook update this weekend as I did last weekend. I just got out for my walk today doing a little banking and grocery shopping, and I'm hesitant to go back in the house. It ended up being a pretty nice afternoon after a pretty rainy overnight and morning. But I do have a few things I wanted to update folks on. Our number of positive cases as of today is, hi Doreen, is 590 in the village of Ossining. There is, as folks know, you've heard me, if you've watched any of these before, you've heard me talk about how the Open Door is one of the testing facilities. It's one of the first testing facilities that was up and running in Westchester, and that contributes to our number of positive cases. And I just read in an update from the county from our recent municipal meeting that there are 2 more testing sites that are going to be opening I guess very soon, if not yet, one in Yonkers and one in Mount Vernon. But wherever testing sites are, you do need to have an appointment. You can't just show up. Hey, Chief Sylvester, good to see you. I wanted to just offer folks an update on some of the things that the trustees and I have been talking about. If you've seen any of our recent village board meetings, we've been talking a fair amount about where we are with our budget, what we think we might be able to anticipate for revenue and revenue shortfalls for this year. As you know, we are on a calendar year, so we're in the middle of a third of the way through our 2020 budget, and now is a good time for us to consider, do we want to continue planning to move forward with some of the projects that we had intended for this year, and some of them are going to be necessary anyway, and maybe we should continue to move forward if we have money in the budget to be able to cover it. But there is so much unknown as far as our revenue that some of those items are in a little bit of a holding pattern. We'll be revisiting that topic again this week. In fact, this Wednesday is the 4th Wednesday of the month, which typically the trustees and I have a dinner meeting before our work session, which is an opportunity for the 5 of us to connect with each other. It's not a meeting that's usually televised because though it's a public meeting, anyone could show up if they wanted. But this time it will be. It'll be recorded, and you can watch it while it's happening on Zoom this Wednesday. Ooh, look at that cool little sunlight we're getting in there. I don't usually do these outside. And I know some of what we'll be talking about this week among the trustees and myself is what do we want to identify as our priorities at this stage with this ever-changing outlook for village government. It's helpful if the 5 of us can all get on the same page so that we can be clear in what we want our staff to be spending time preparing for. Are there local laws we want to have teed up for when we are able to get back in a room together and be in a room with you and hear your reactions to it? If we have some things ready, then hopefully we'll be able to hit the ground running. That said, everything is still the most frustrating part of this is the unknown. Right now, we are still on pause until May 15th, and as everybody knows now, is the decision making about when we move into a stage of slightly less restriction will be up to Governor Cuomo. He's the one who told us we're on pause until May 15th. I don't know if that means they're just going to let the status quo be as it is, and then on May 15th they'll reevaluate, or if they're already reevaluating right now. He's made it pretty clear that his priorities are to get more testing up and running so that we, because that is critical to being able to open up into some semblance of being a functional community again, where we might be.
How are you?
Hi, how are you, Patrick? That's my neighbor, Patrick Ward. Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Are you doing an update?
I am doing an update right now, Patrick. You're on.
Well, good. God bless everybody. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Wear your masks.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. God bless.
Take care. That's my neighbor, Patrick Ward, who's also an auxiliary police officer, and he moved to Ossining a couple of years ago, and one of the really terrific things that he did for our community was inspire us to hold the vigil down at the waterfront earlier this year in the wake of some of the gun violence tragedies. So it's good to see Patrick. I don't spend enough time on my front porch. It's nice to be able to see neighbors, even from a distance. It's so rare that we get to connect with each other in the real world, isn't it? I'll just finish up telling you some of the things that the trustees and I are talking about to have ready to go and to try and keep moving forward. Things that don't cost us money up front. Things like we talked a couple of meetings ago, we heard a proposal from staff. They had done a lot of research on how events are organized and permitted in other communities, and what fees might be involved, and what makes sense to be able to, for our staff to be able to support events in our community, because someday we will be out in the world again. Not at all what we thought. I'm not sure what this summer will look like or what this fall will look like, but the last things, the last stage is where we all get to be in a space together with hundreds of people together. So we have a little bit of time to get the events policy and fees in place. That's one of the things we're going to be talking about this week, is how do we move forward, some things like that, so that when organizations come to us and say, we want to plan our event for whenever later this year, in hopes that we'll all be able to be there together, that we're ready to move that forward. And the last thing I'm going to mention is again about the census, but tying it into what we're seeing right now. We know that the federal government has been putting forward some money into the CARES Act. Some of that's been controversial. It was intended to be directed at small businesses, and there's a little bit of a loophole, and some really big businesses are taking advantage of that money and depleting the fund before it gets to so many of the small businesses that really need it, like the businesses we have in Ossining. We have very, very, very few chain restaurants or businesses that are of a national presence. Most of our economy is dependent on small business owners who were largely not able to take advantage of the money that was put out very recently by the federal government. Our fingers are crossed that there will be more of it coming out next week. I also just read a lengthy list of information sent to me by the New York Conference of Mayors, talking about the potential for CARES Act finances to go directly to municipal governments, distributed through counties. And once again, that's money that will be distributed per capita. And that means they're looking at census numbers. They're looking at our 2010 census numbers. So while I very much hope that there is money that's going to be directed to local governments to help us get through this period, so that we don't want to raise taxes on people that don't have an income. We don't want to be raising trying to get money on the backs of the people of our community that are struggling so mightily. So any help that we can get from the federal government, they're the ones who print the money, would be helpful. And unfortunately, the money is doled out per capita. And while we do have tens of thousands of people who are acknowledged as living in Ossining, we know that 10 years ago, when the census was done, we only had about 64% of the known household addresses in Ossining responding. And we are unfortunately on pace to be a similar rate this time. So let's please, please, please work on, if you have not responded to the census, please respond to the census, because there's a lot of money out there right now, and that census numbers are going to be getting updated this year, and the final rolls will be out in 2021. So any additional funding that comes out next year is going to be reflective of our census count that we're doing right now. So please tell a friend, tell a neighbor. If somebody needs you to help walk them through the application, if you feel able to do that, please do. If not, please reach out to me. I will be glad to either help them myself or get them in touch with somebody who has been trained to answer questions. Some of the questions we hear a lot are for people who have anyone who may be undocumented in their household, or if they are an immigrant here and are at all worried about their status for any reason. There's so much confrontational, controversial talk in the last few years about policies related to immigrants. That is often something that discourages people from wanting to apply. But there is no question about citizenship on the census questionnaire. Also, the information that is gathered is not identified by the individual, is not identified by the household. It gets put into a pool with anyone in your census tract, which is several blocks within the village. There are more protections for census confidentiality and information than you will find in almost any government document or government process. And we can get you information about that if somebody is really worried about that, if that's what's discouraging them from responding. If the reason they haven't responded is because they just don't think that it's worth their time, it's really a few minutes, and it's really, really important for our community. And it's important for our community anytime, but right now, when we are going to be increasingly dependent on funding from state and federal authorities and county authorities, we want to make sure that Ossining has getting its fair share of funding opportunities. We're really going to need it. Ossining residents are hurting. Our businesses are hurting. We need financial support particularly from the federal government. That's who prints the money. Often they distribute it to the states to be distributed to our communities. And we want our census numbers to reflect accurately who really lives in Ossining and how many of us there are. All right, I'm going to try and give you a beautiful view of the Hudson River on my way out here. We'll see if I can do it without it being too blown out. Can you see the sunset at the Hudson? There we go. It's gorgeous, right? We really do live in a beautiful community. Take care. Be well.